biggest ever climate protest in photos. Greta Thunberg and the world's youth demand action. Millions of people, mostly young students, from across 185 countries, took to the streets of towns and cities around the world Friday, united across time zones and cultures to participate in the largest climate protest in history, to demand urgent action from governments and every sector of society to save our planet. Accompanying the young protesters were adults supporting their pressing call. Trade unions representing hundreds of millions of people, employees of all kinds including from firms such as Amazon, Google and Facebook, doctors, nurses and public workers marching alongside the students. While local climate issues were emphasized in the different countries, for example, control of rising sea levels in the Solomon Islands, a ban on toxic waste and new mining in South Africa, controls on air pollution and plastic waste in India, a Green New Deal in the US and UK, the global demand was unified around a single theme: cut emissions and stabilize the climate. The global demonstrations followed the sun, beginning in the Pacific and Asia, and culminating in a massive demonstration in New York, with young Swedish activist and candidate for the Nobel Prize Greta Thunberg at the helm, on the eve of a UN climate summit to start next week at the organization's Manhattan headquarters, intended to inject urgency into government's actions to restrict the rise in global temperatures. Carbon emissions climbed to a record high last year, despite a warning from the UN-backed Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, The Guardian wrote. There is little more than a decade left to act to slash emissions and stabilize the climate. The strikes kicked off in Pacific Island nations, all threatened by rising sea levels, where students from Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Marshall Islands, Tonga, New Caledonia, the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea took part in poetry performances, silent protests, sporting events and discussions and chanted, "We are not sinking, we are fighting." It was followed by Australia, a country already suffering from soaring temperatures and warming seas that have contributed to the death of half the Great Barrier Reef on the northeast coast, and where more than 350,000 people joined the protests. The demonstrations spread throughout cities in Asia, Africa and the Americas. In Europe they took place in most countries, with huge crowds in Warsaw, Poland, and more than 1.4 million people taking action across Germany, according to The Guardian. As protests took place in 500 towns and cities across Germany, the BBC reported, the country's coalition government announced a €54 billion, $60 billion package aimed at cutting greenhouse gases. In the UK, hundreds of thousands are believed to have taken part in cities across all four countries.